All right. So here is the other half of the promised demo stuff. So we'll dive into getting OpenSUSE installed so you can see how that works. Yep. Oh yeah. But by the way, notice it did change to OpenSUSE, but again, it's not that big a deal. If it's not 2048 at least, that'll give you slightly better experience. And then here at least 20. And the more the better, but if all you can spare is 20, go 20. We'll create that. In settings, processor up to 2. And we'll start it. Find our ISO. Don't forget to add it. It doesn't ever show up in that list unless you've used it before, so make sure you add it. Element OpenSUSE. There it is. Oh, they've made it slightly fancier. On this one, there's a little timer, so you got to be careful. Don't let it just sit there, otherwise it'll boot and it'll say failed and failed and failed and failed. So make sure you arrow down to installation. Let it do the whole boot up jazz. And this one's going to be more similar to CentOS than it is to Ubuntu. When we get to Ubuntu, you'll notice that it's all text user interface. I showed you aptitude a little bit in the previous video, and yeah, that's kind of the vibe that you'll get with Ubuntu. Got to use the arrows to move around, tab to move to the next thing, all that. But with OpenSUSE, you'll get a full-on installation GUI like you did with CentOS. Once it gets there. So out of all the distros that are out there, OpenSUSE tends to be the one that is the closest that you would get to something like Windows, because they have this tool set that nobody else uses. It's not closed source that I'm aware of, but it's OpenSUSE's secret sauce, and it's called YAST, and I think it stands for something like Yet Another Setup Tool or something. They have really weird recursive names in open source software. YAST is one of those. There's a scripting language called YAML, and it's Yet Another Markup Language. They have. Oh man, I had an idea of one, and I can't remember it at the moment. It'll come back to me randomly, I'm sure. GNU. There's a lot of tools that are in Linux that you'll find that are really tools that aren't really Linux native tools. They're tools brought over from the. I think one of the main contributors to it at the very beginning was Richard Stallman. He's now the head of the Free Software Foundation, and he's a very big free software proponent. But so GNU, GNU, stands for GNU is not Unix, and yeah, so the G in GNU stands for GNU. That's just weird. that has become a thing. Anyway, so same as in CentOS, English. Oh, by the way, you don't get the weird mouse craziness in OpenSUSE. So yeah, you can click in here, do some stuff, and then click out and do some stuff. You don't need to remember your host key for SUSE, which is great. Anyway, so you can test your keyboard if you want to, but otherwise, English, if that's fine, click next. Anyway, detected your network connection. Do you want to activate online repositories? Yes, this is how you will go get your updates and stuff using hint zipper later. All right, just keep the defaults here. We don't need to add any additional repositories. These are just fine. A lot of these other repositories are for you to compile your own software or to beta test stuff, and that is not what I'd like you to do. If you want to do that, you can, but do that in a separate VM, just so you don't blow yours up. But one thing I will promise you is one of your VMs somewhere, sometime, will probably crash. I will remind you of how to take a snapshot a little bit later. But anyway, this might take a little while depending on your internet speed. This is going to reach out and touch all of those repositories and find the fastest one for you, and then add it to its configuration, and then it should move on at that point. But give it just a minute here. All right. So you're given a few different things that you can do with this. I mean, you can basically just make it a desktop Linux operating system if you want to. And I mean, that's really what we're going to do. It doesn't add a whole lot of stuff, but you'll likely get things like LibreOffice so you can do documents or whatever. But this is just the easiest way for us to get a graphical user interface in here. So choose desktop with GNOME. Yeah, speaking of GNU, GNOME. And it's going to tell you how it's going to set stuff up. As we move into the semester, we'll get into what all of this jazz means. Subvolumes. They use a different file system. So Windows obviously uses NTFS. CentOS prefers XFS. OpenSUSE prefers BTR or BTreeFS. You'll hear it as ButterFS as well. And Ubuntu prefers ext4. So not anything you got to remember now, but yeah, you'll hear me say that again later on down the line. Anyway, so this is really just a preview, so no big deal. Just note that, and we'll move on. All right. Time zone, you can find it here. Look for Chicago, or you can probably click around here somewhere. There it is. Central Chicago. Hit next. Or, like I said, you can find it in the list, either or. And here we go. Fill all this stuff out. You do want this user to be an admin. This way, again, you can use the sudo or sudo command to do things rather than elevate to root to do all that stuff. Yeah, my password is simple. You know. These are VMs. I consider them throwaways, so I don't put really crazy passwords in them or anything. Anyway, and this is just an overview of all the decisions that you made throughout. So nothing too terribly interesting in here. But hit install and confirm. It confirms because if you're not careful, you can select a disk. So say you had more than one disk. You can select the wrong disk on accident and blow everything away in the process. So yeah, just that last final little, are you sure you want to do that? Yeah. All right. So, yeah, this will take a while. It should be pulling all of these things off of the Leap or the OpenSUSE disk. You can see this one here, OpenSUSE Leap 15.2-1. This is coming off of the ISO that we have in the virtual machine, and it actually, which is kind of cool, it does give you a package countdown, which is nice. This is part of YAST, by the way. These are just, like I said, some of that secret sauce. It gives you way more information than, well, it makes available way more information from the get-go in the GUI than most other Linux distributions do. With CentOS or with Ubuntu, you really kind of have to dig down into the logs to find out what's going on. And, you know, during these processes, you don't really get a lot of feedback other than, I'm working. So this is kind of nice. And you'll notice there's a couple of one package I need to pull from the main repository on the internet, and about 2 gigs of packages I need to pull down from the main update repository. So this may take a little while. But one of the cool things about this is that most of your updates are done during install. So part of the process that I'm having you go through in the lab, which is update, most of that should be done for you. So when you do go to update, that will be quick. They front load all of this stuff for you. And if you're keeping an eye open, if you look at some of these packages, they're scrolling across the screen, you can identify exactly what type of software package OpenSUSE likes to use. So you see, number dot x86 underscore 64 dot, whatever that is, should give you a hint. All right. Well, don't trust that time. That time should not. It should not. It should not take like an hour and a half. So, yeah, just sit tight, and we'll let it do its thing. Well, last time I started playing with it, I broke CentOS, so I'm not gonna touch it again. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask. But other than that, I'll probably just let it do its thing. And likely when I post it on YouTube, I'll cut all this middle stuff out. All right, so it's gonna reboot. Yay! All right, so if you have the disk in the VM here still, it'll likely try to give you the options again to try and install it. You can take out the disk, just right click, uncheck it. It'll probably get mad at you until you know for a sec. Let's see. Oh, nope, it just popped it right out. Cool. But from this point, you may get lucky if you boot from hard disk. Let's see. Hey, cool, it does work. But every time after that, it won't give you that preliminary choice. It'll just drop you down to the OpenSUSE boot. But this should already look familiar. The logo's a little different, but that little spinny circle we saw with CentOS. So it's going to almost be identical here. We'll give it a minute for that first little setup. Windows finally did something right, and they gave you that, please wait, setting everything up for you. We could use a little bit of that. The spinny circle is fine. Okay. Cool. So at this point, everything is the same as CentOS outside of the choices that you make package management wise. So you'll definitely want to check the notes for how OpenSUSE handles software. We kind of talked about it before with the RPM stuff. So you'll need to take a look at how to get automatic software, right? So when you go get VS Code, RPM, but when you do the automatic software, that's really what you'll need to check the notes for. So take a look there, and then, as I said, take a screenshot showing me everything that you've done so far. And then from here, we'll get down to Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is a little more tricky in that the server version of Ubuntu does not give you a GUI right off the bat. So we'll need to add that after the fact. So anyway, so from here, and this goes for CentOS 2 to get out, to shut down. I think I just stopped the video before I shut CentOS down, but VMs are quite literally real computers. Just because they're running inside of a window doesn't make them any less real. And if you just hit the X button and power off, that's like pulling the plug from the back of your desktop. You wouldn't do that. So if you're going to come to this menu, you can do send the shutdown signal, and that will typically work in just about every Linux distro. Or up here in the top right, click on this, and down here the power button. That will power off. So do that each and every time. Otherwise, you will eventually run into some kind of leftover crud, and it may prevent you from booting or logging in properly, or something might break. So do treat them as normal, as a normal actual computer. So for Ubuntu, let's go through this set of stuff up to 2 gigs again. Continue. Same with virtual hard disk. Dynamic is fine. Bring that up to 20. Okay. Start this guy. Add another ISO. It used to be easier than that. You used to just be able to point it to the ISO without having to go through all this. Make sure you're on 1804. That will keep you as close to me as you possibly can. I had someone accidentally do 2004, and we didn't catch it until like the third lab, so it didn't really seem like there were a whole lot of issues, but we did run into package differences where I had assumed something was there, and it was not. So we had to just go back and install it. So it was an easy fix, but it did cause a little friction. So be aware. 1804 is what I'm using. If we use anything else, then just keep in mind it might be a little different. All right, so 1804. Good. Start this. Yes, sir.
Is there anything stopping us, if our computers can handle it, of giving more RAM to these virtual machines?
Not at all. The more, the better. I've just been honestly that may have been what killed my CentOS box in the first place. Not enough RAM. But yeah, if you can spare it, give them 4 or 6. That will give them a little more room to stretch their legs, and yeah, hopefully you avoid some other issues just in case. But 2 gigs seems to be good enough, the bare minimum, and everything will be all right. All right, so once you hit Ubuntu, you'll realize, yeah, it's meant for the cloud, man. Everything is text-based. So anyway, English, same as before. Yes, sir. Okay, cool. So with this one, this is kind of optional for you. You can update the installer. I've not seen anything go wrong if you don't update the installer. So you can choose either or, but updating the installer will take an extra minute or so, which, I mean, you know, if you're just clicking enter and looking away and then clicking enter the next step, it should be fine. But in the interest of time, I'm going to go without updating. And then layout for your keyboard, variant for your keyboard, English, hit done. Now it automatically picks up your network interface. It just assumes, I mean, again, kind of made for the cloud. So, I mean, it assumes network is something that you absolutely want at the very beginning. Let me see. I'm going to make sure I want to do everything. Yep. Okay. So nothing to do here either. So scroll down, hit done. You don't need a proxy unless you know you need a proxy. So if you don't know what a proxy is, or you've never used a proxy before, you don't need to put anything in this box. If for some reason though you live in a place or you are at a place that instructs you on how to configure your proxy, you need to put that IP address and everything else in here. But likely that is not gonna you're not gonna need that. So nothing there. The top option is perfect. This is the main Ubuntu repository where you'll download all your software. And just this first option here, use an entire disk. It's not going to use any of the fancy logical volume stuff. It's just going to plop all of the installation onto one big old partition. So use the entire disk. This is you're choosing the disk. So if you had 5 or 6 disks, you would see all of them here. But we only have one, so just hit enter. And then it's going to give you an idea. You'll have a boot partition here, and then everything else gets plopped on the rest of the big partition that it makes. Hit done. And it's just going to double check on you. Because again, when you do anything with disks, whatever was on that disk before is no longer going to be on that disk. So just a double check. And then here you go. Fill in everything else. If you haven't figured out by now, tab will get you down to the next line and let you start typing. Call it that. And that should do it. You can install OpenSSH server, but we'll skip it. We'll install it manually later. Hit done. And then this is, so speaking of secret sauce, Ubuntu has a secret sauce called Snap. It is a way. Actually, it's got more parallels to Docker. Have either of you two seen Docker or heard of Docker or know what it is?
No,
Okay.
I've heard of it. I couldn't tell you what it is though.
Okay. So Docker is basically a way to put a piece of software inside of a container so that it cannot escape, essentially. So this software runs inside of a sandbox, and it cannot touch your system. It only gets the permissions that you give it. So think of installing a app on Android or iOS. When you install it on Android, it just gives you a big old long list of all the permissions that it needs. On iOS, you, on a case-by-case basis, allow, like the app is asking for mic access or the app is asking for, whatever access. That's basically the idea, that we don't want to give these pieces of software any access outside of, what we explicitly said. So anyway, so snaps are Ubuntu's secret sauce, and you can install all kinds of stuff with it, but it's in a container, and that makes you slightly safer running some of that software. So long story short, that won't show up on the test or anything like that, but you see it here, so I figured I would talk about it just for a sec. But you don't need anything. You can arrow all the way down or tab to get to done down here, and that's it. So this whole time it's been installing in the background, so I haven't been wasting too much time. But now we'll just let it finish itself up. All right, here, let's reboot this thing and see what happens. Ubuntu will actually kick it out for you. It'll kick the disk out right here. And so when you hit enter, you don't have to worry about whether or not the disk is still inserted into the VM. It is not. So the boot should probably, as far as all the booting times go, be quickest on Ubuntu, because there's not a whole lot to deal with. All right. Log in. But this is obviously not the same as as the other Linuxes that we have logged into up to this point. Some of this gibberish is generating SSH keys so you can securely connect to this box and all of this fun stuff. So you can mostly ignore a lot of that. For now, we'll dive into SSH a little later in the semester. But for now, you need to get to the point where you can update and install software. So luckily for you, if you let the installer do the updates during the install, a lot of those updates are already done for you, but you probably still need a little bit. So if you are eagle-eyed or you even actually just watched the video at all, this might give away some of the things. Yeah, still need 64 packages, but not a whole lot. Not a lot compared to what CentOS is going to give you. That might be a few updates. But at this point, we need to get right here. We need to install the Ubuntu desktop. If you want a GUI, this is the way that you're going to have to do it. So sudo apt install Ubuntu desktop, and yeah, it's going to be quite a bit of stuff. It's going to be a lot of stuff. So all that stuff that flew by the screen are all the packages that we need to add. So it looks like a download of 600 meg is what we'll need. So the ISO was about 800 meg, but but that was tiny compared to OpenSUSE and CentOS. OpenSUSE being about 4, CentOS being about 8. This is how you pay for it right here. You got to do it after the fact. So hit enter, and it's just gonna fly through. If the faster your internet, the faster the first part of this goes, which is just downloading all these packages. The rest of it, the other half is going to fully be dependent on how many CPU cores, how fast they are, how much RAM you gave it, and all of that. So yeah, download's only half the battle. But we'll let that go, and yeah, reconvene again after this is done. All right, so see if I can remember this command. Yeah, so sudo, well, I don't know if I need sudo or not, but it'll tell me. Sudo systemctl isolate graphical dot target. Nice. I hit tab too many times. So it's like, here you go. All right. So, there we go. So that command, systemctl space isolate space graphical.target will tell the command line to, hey, stop doing command line and do this GUI thing. So now you should get to the point where you can just log into the GUI now. As you will see, OpenSUSE, CentOS, and Ubuntu all agree the GNOME desktop is the desktop. There are tons more. There are a huge amount of desktops that are available for you to choose from in just in general. There's XFCE, there's Mate, there's Cinnamon, there's Plasma, OpenBox. What else is there? There's tons. There's quite literally at least a dozen that are pretty popular, but it seems like the consensus, though, is GNOME. Ubuntu has its own little spin on it. They put all their icons out here, just make them visible. I don't know, I guess kind of Mac style. It's the way I've got it over here on my Mac. So anyway, long story short, this GUI is really just here to give you a little bit of comfort in your time of need, because everything is going to really just be done through the terminal anyway. But it does give you, the ability to launch Firefox, or poke around at the files or something like that if you want to take a look. And everything else is fairly similar. You've got that menu up here where you shut it down from and all that stuff. But you'll need to do one additional thing. I think there was a message that came up. You will probably get this message as well. Ignore this. Do not upgrade to 2004. And this is likely because it's running in a VM. And GUIs don't, or GNOME doesn't tend to like to run in a VM. Anyway, so don't upgrade. You have declined the upgrade. Yes, I know. All right. The last thing that you need to do, if you want Ubuntu to boot up to the GUI every single time, you don't even want to think about it. You don't want to have to run that isolate command anymore. You just want it to every time reboot straight to the GUI. You'll need to run one more command. Let me get this out of the way, and that is systemctl. Let me see, what is it? Is it get default? Yeah, sure enough. It already is set. Never mind. You won't have to make this change. So systemctl get default tells you which target it's targeting. So one thing, we're going to cover this again later, so you don't need to memorize this now. But the specific targets are talking about the environments that you get into. So the one we were into before, where it was just command line, is multi-user.target. So if we did systemctl get default and it said multi-user target here, that would tell me that when we rebooted, we're going to get booted into the command line and not into the graphical user interface. But because it says graphical, I don't have to worry about it. So it seems like if you hadn't done it yet, if you just reboot, Ubuntu will boot straight up into the GUI. You don't even need to do that isolate command if you haven't done it already. So anyway, from here, it's just doing the same old thing. Go to the VS Code website, download the package specific for Ubuntu, and then install it via the command line. Take a screenshot when that's done. And then, take a screenshot when that's done here. And then as on the other ones, launch VS Code. Just, find the icon, click it, hit go, and then take a screenshot of VS Code running. And then the last thing is to install HTOP. So there's a bit of a hint. The way that I installed Ubuntu Desktop earlier is the same way that you're going to install HTOP here on Ubuntu. So rewind a little bit and you'll see it. But other than that, the last thing I'll show you is one way to power off a machine straight from the command line, and that is right there. Power off, all one word. Hit enter on that. and it will gracefully but quickly shut down. So if you have like text pad, notepads open, stuff like that, and you haven't saved your stuff, yeah, power off doesn't care. it's just gonna power off. So it does what you tell it to do. I think that's one lesson you will learn about the command line as you go on through. If you set it, it'll do it. If you set it wrong, it will scream at you usually. All right. So while I know the video was crazy long, both sessions, they're not normally going to be this long. The reason it was so long was because we needed to go through those installs, and I wanted to make sure that everybody started from the same spot so that we really can just get into Linux, focus, and start learning the differences between the two, or between the three, and yeah, go from there. There will be a point probably in about 3 or 4 weeks where I don't care which one you use. You'll have the option to use CentOS, OpenSUSE, or Ubuntu for some of your labs, because at the heart of it, once you get past the yum and app difference or whatever, you'll get to the point where it's all just Linux at that point. So you can use any of them, and any practice on any Linux is good practice. All right. Well, that'll do it here. Take your screenshots. Please put it all into a PDF right here. Actually, I don't think I mentioned this earlier in the last video, so I'll make sure I put it here. Don't forget, y'all all have access to Google Drive. So a super duper easy way to submit for my labs is just to crack open a new Google Doc. The snipping tool, you guys may or may not be familiar with the snipping tool. Here in Mac, it's not the same. But look for the snipping tool in Windows. That will let you create a screen grab or a snapshot, a screenshot of whatever it is that you want to take a screenshot of. Once you see it, you don't have to save it. You can Control-C. So once you see the image that you want, in Mac it's Command-C, just in case anybody's running a Mac. In Windows, it's Control-C. And then in the document over here, you can just Control-C, or I'm sorry, Control-V to paste it, or Command-V in Mac, and you'll have it there. And just add a little bit of flavor to it. Question 1, something like that, or screenshot 1, whatever it is. And then go down. Number 2, do the same thing, right? Screenshot 2, and let's just totally pretend that I took another screenshot and put it down there. The important bit, though, is download as PDF. So do that. And the resulting file is what I would like you to submit. You don't really have to worry about putting your name on it or anything like that. Moodle handles all that for me, keeps it all straight. So I don't need you don't need to worry too much about that. If you put your name on there, I do appreciate it. But if you forget, don't sweat it. It's not a big deal. But submit me that PDF, and that'll get you through pretty much every single one of the labs that you'll encounter. All right. Well, that really will do it, I think. So I'll stop the recording here.